Chapter 581, Tyrants and Lickers came out as small monsters. Even the veteran mercenaries of the Golden Sunlight Mercenary Group, which was claimed to be the most ferocious mercenary group, leapt up in fear. Without thinking, others were in even worse states. Even the female players were scared when they entered the bar as Claire, the main character, and saw the zombie, which looked similar to the first generation, eating a corpse. What's this mystical realm? This mystical realm is not for cultivation, it's used to scare people. The mercenaries complained loudly. After all, they had fought countless battles. If they were given a bit of their cultivation strength, they would be killing machines in the game. The mages shared this thought. If we can cast a spiritual spell in the game, even a small fireball will work. However, they couldn't use any of their strength. The mercenaries yelled, "It's despicable to increase the difficulty by suppressing our strength. Besides, the monsters in the can't be killed." Crete yelled, "After I shattered its chest with land shatter, the combat technique that he used to kick the zombie, it didn't die. It could still bite people as if nothing happened. How can such monsters exist in the world?" Different from Resident Evil 1, almost no one survived in the entire city. In Resident Evil 2, the zombies were everywhere. In Resident Evil 1, the players would only encounter one zombie at the beginning. I dare to bet that no one can last more than 1 minute with these monsters, Crete said as his face turned red in agitation. While he said that, he heard an exclamation. "Wow! Is this a magical firearm? Awesome!" The mercenaries looked back and saw the young people who had put down their virtual reality headsets in fear now gather around the girl named CIA. She controlled Claire, who was holding an object that looked like a magical firearm. Crack, crack, crack. Then, she quickly ran out. The mercenaries exchanged a look and wondered, this mystical realm can be like this. Confident in their own strengths, the mercenaries naturally had a hard time accepting the skills and knowledge in the game. Instead, they tried to kill zombies with their own combat techniques. Claire, the heroine, was soon rescued by Leon, who fired at the zombies with a gun, and it was natural for her to notice this weapon. After all, this series of games had always been nice to heroines. Although there were many zombies, and the process was extremely dangerous thrilling, she still managed to flee from the zombies as she screamed. Different from the original version, the system version had more than those set routes. The players could enter all the shops and houses in the small town to search for supplies. If they could dodge the zombies that were everywhere, they might find weapons and monsters that the original version didn't have. Although the ammunition was limited, they could use sabers, daggers, and other weapons that they picked up from the ground. After escaping from the siege of the zombies, these people explored the small town with pistols in their hands. Although the atmosphere was tense and suppressing, the players felt a pleasure after escaping from death. The thrilling sensation rushed out of their minds after experiencing the life and death situation. "Oh, this is so cool." Excellent. Despite the dangers around them, they had the urge and the impulse to keep exploring, trying to find out what had happened to this world, why the people had turned into monsters, and if there were more of such magical firearms. "We can play it like this." Mercenary Crete, who had swore that no one could last more 1 minute, was frustrated, and his face turned dark. He turned his head and saw the female mage getting into the zone and enjoying herself. She was busy shooting zombies with her small pistol. "Let's try it too. I remember that I have such a magical firearm too." If they broke out from the siege, they could use their physical strength as warriors to fight the lone zombies. Their combat strengths weren't low, and they could use melee weapons. At this moment, the health condition of Claire, who was under the control of the female mage, deteriorated. She found that somehow a claw scratch appeared on her arm. This wound had blackened, and something was wriggling in the wound. It was a terrifying scene. No, the monster's claws contained poison. Gradually, everything before her turned bloody red, and she somehow felt a strange urge to eat. Soon, the female mage was forced to exit from the virtual reality mode. Meanwhile, Claire had turned into a pale-faced zombie, lunging toward the screen viciously. Her hands shivered, and she was so frightened that she almost wetted her pants. A moment ago, this female mage was still Claire. She seemed to see herself in the other world turning into a ghost-like creature. That's how these creatures came into being. If I get scratched by them, I'll turn into this type of creatures. Seeing zombie Claire loitering aimlessly on the street, the mercenaries including Creep felt chills run down their spines. In the original game, the players could be healed by eating the green herbs. But now, in the new version, any medicine could only heal wounds. If the players contracted the virus, they must find blood serum before they got turned into zombies. Otherwise, one scratch would turn them into zombies. Obviously, this new version was more difficult to play. Experiencing this situation in person, the mages and mercenaries on this new continent began to realize these creatures' terrifying features bit by bit. One light scratch could turn people into monsters just like them. This realization shocked the players like the continuous waves of the ocean. The players' hearts were in their throats whenever they fought with these monsters. Even if they remained intact through the battle, they were still worried that their companions might have been scratched by a zombie, and they would be bitten by their zombified companions while they were not looking. The players didn't even know when a zombie would appear since they were everywhere in the city. If this were real life, some faint-hearted people would collapse under this pressure. However, since it was a game, this dark and creepy world stimulated the people's desire to explore. Without thinking, the female mage started the game again and re-entered this strange world. Rolling up his sleeves, the mercenary Crete quickly entered the game again. In the virtual reality mode, Resident Evil 2 was much more difficult than Resident Evil 1. Therefore, the main characters who were only ordinary people faced even greater pressure compared to the previous game. For example, Leon came to the police station to report to duty, so he quickly entered the building to investigate. This was the same beginning for all male players. However, when Crete controlled Leon to explore the police station with great care, he suddenly heard a yell of alarm. He saw a bald man wearing a green military coat standing before him like a huge iron tower, a tyrant. On the other side, CIA and the female mage who were playing as Claire shrieked as well. The ceiling broke open, revealing a disgusting monster whose brains were exposed. Liquor. Yes, the bosses in the movie and game of Resident Evil 1 showed up soon after the beginning of Resident Evil 2. Chapter 582, Understanding of Ultimate Techniques. Not only the mercenaries and mages in the new shop, but the old players in the Geocity shop, the Half-City shop, and the Yuan Yang City shop were stupefied as well. How can it be? With such a high difficulty level, how can we play it with enjoyment? What was more, this was the lowest difficulty level. Everyone knew that the lickers were powerful. They had great hearing and could hear everything, including when one was walking, running, and even breathing. Lickers couldn't walk upright, but they could climb the walls and ceilings with their powerful limbs and claws. With their super powerful jumps and swift movement speed, they could even dodge strafing firearms. In the original version, the lickers were not so powerful. After all, the players were not professional fighters. But now, the lickers in the game were as powerful as those in Resident Evil 1. Tyrants were just as powerful if not more. The players were astonished that they encountered these extremely horrifying monsters soon after the game began. These powerful tyrants and lickers were hard to handle even if the mercenaries and mages had their cultivation strengths with them. The mass-produced tyrants were much more powerful than the first-generation tyrants, and they wouldn't die even when they were plunged into melted iron. Unless grandmasters moved, spiritual spells could only tickle them. They were like human-shaped weapons. But now, the players had to face such monsters as ordinary people. This tyrant obviously saw the main character controlled by the blonde mercenary Crete. What's this creature? It didn't look like a zombie, but its iron tower-like body, metallic skin, and cold inhuman eyes emanated a great suppressive aura onto the people when it looked at them. Obviously, the new players in the new shop didn't recognize the tyrant. This big bald guy looks strong, but I have a gun with me. At the same time, the female mage, Lilith, had a similar thought facing the licker. Although the monster before me looks horrifying, I'm not afraid since I have a magical firearm that is more advanced than those firearms created by dwarfs. At this moment, Leon already fired at the monster under Crete's control. Bang! The guns fired. Crete's eyes opened wide as the bullet which could shatter a zombie's head bounced off from the tyrant's forehead. Then, the tyrant that had an iron tower-like body strode over while almost ignoring the bullets before punching down. The tyrant's huge body created a gust. Its huge body didn't look nimble, but its speed surpassed the limit for humans. More horrifying was that it had strong combat techniques. Boom! A big hole appeared on the ground as Leon's head was shattered like a watermelon. Being forced to exit the virtual reality mode, Crete gaped at the scene on the screen. He turned his head and saw Clara under the female mage Lilith's control being pierced by a long tongue before she could react. A thought struck these at the same time: can anyone defeat such monsters? Meanwhile, the young fighters had also exited the virtual reality mode. They stared at the screens in shock. What are these monsters? Isn't this mystical realm a basic one? Crete yelled. After all, only the basic mystical realms suppressed the participants' strengths. But this one, the basic mystical realms built by mages with magical methods, were usually used by beginners and thus wouldn't have monsters too powerful for their abilities. After all, even when masters entered such realms, they would try to show the beginners the combat techniques instead of escaping techniques. But such powerful monsters were impossible for people other than true masters and godly spellcasters to defeat. You even suppressed our strength and turned us into ordinary people. What is the meaning of this? What is the use of this game? Mystical realm. We can't even escape properly. Are we just coming here to die? This is the mystical realm with the worst design that I've ever seen. After many failed attempts, Crete said with a snort. As Chris's sister, Claire had strong combat techniques. Leon, who had just graduated from the police academy, was a genius. Combat techniques were not only fighting skills, there were also techniques in exerting force and how to better control oneself. Not able to pass this stage, the young people glanced around and saw that the shop owner was also playing the game. After watching for a while, they pointed at Fang Chi's screen and said, "Why don't you try to dodge?" On Fang Chi's screen, he was also facing the tyrant. One wall in the corridor had been shattered by the tyrant with one punch. At the moment when the tyrant charged forward with a punch, Fang Chi took a couple of swift steps and kicked the wall in the corridor with perfect timing. Then, he stomped the wall, and the repulsion force sent him behind the tyrant. Then, he stood up and left, getting out of tyrant's attack range without a fuss. For ordinary people, after they died several times in the game that was too difficult for them, they would either change the game setting illegally, or clear the stage with other cheat, or just give it up. But for masters and lovers of games, they had different thoughts about the games. With greater difficulty and challenges, these players would get greater enjoyment from the game even though the journey was full of hardships. It was the same case with the true masters who walked step after step toward their goal with determination. They loved challenges and were not afraid of hardships, setbacks, and failures. Why can't you handle a more powerful opponent? What did you do when you encountered such a situation in real life? Fang Chi asked. But this is a mystical realm. Crete refuted loudly. Perhaps. But for me, it's just a game, Fang Chi said mildly while controlling Leon to dodge the tyrant's pursuit. Dodging its harsh attacks and finding its weaknesses before defeating it with any method you can is the wisdom of playing games. It was the fun of games to defeat seemingly invincible enemies with one's own wisdom. The others froze, looking as if they understood something. Meanwhile, the players in the old shops encountered the same problem. Nalan Hongwu looked at his screen in frustration after several failed attempts, and he almost puked blood. After thinking for a few moments, he controlled Leon to move swiftly. As an ordinary person, it was extremely difficult to dodge such an attack. Therefore, it was extremely critical that he must control his strength with precision. Dodge, dodge. At the moment when the tyrant's fist smashed down, Nalan Hongwu suddenly moved his feet and shifted for a few inches to the side in a flash. Then, with small and swift steps, He passed the tyrant with perfect timing. Passed it. Excitement and joy filled his heart in the next moment. Ha ha ha. Old brother. Awesome. Xuanhuan looked at the screenshot that Nalan Hongwu posted in the group and replied, I think I was inspired by you. This was an understanding of an ultimate technique. Chapter 583, Pathetic Foils. Whenever Crete heard the shaking noises of the ground in the game, he was struck with fear. This monster is too terrifying. After all, these young people only practiced their skills on magical beasts and had never placed themselves before such invincible opponents. But now, tyrants and lickers had become the nightmare of these outlanders. Under suffocating suppression, they had to be on guard every second, and their nerves were under a lot of tension. However, after they escaped from their powerful enemy with a narrow margin, the sense of achievement was so great that they couldn't find words to describe it. When one was trapped under life and death pressure, a huge amount of potential would erupt from one's body. Wow! This oriental lady is so beautiful. Obviously, Crete had encountered Adu at this moment. How come such a beautiful lady appeared in this place? Are you here for me? You smell so good. He flirted with her casually, or his neck was instantly broken after he got close to her. Looking at the words game over, he remembered the warning written on the small blackboard. Play the games in a civil way or bear the consequences. It was afternoon when people walked out of the shop. The clean and neat streets were lined with tall buttonwood trees. Although Fang Chi preferred the misty scenery of Jiangnan in Jua City and the elegant antique building styles in Yuanyang City, this city had its own charms. Built beside a river and mountains, the city looked magnificent. There were fancy castles at the top of the mountains. Lower down were the business zones and residential areas for rich people. In the middle was a big street winding its way up to the mountain top. Horses and carriages could be frequently seen on the street. Occasionally, teams of city guards walked past people. In the distance was a huge mountain. The lower ranges were covered by green plants. Fewer plants could be seen higher up, and the top was covered by white snow. This city was a refreshing sight for Fang Chi. It was so thrilling. The three young people were still savoring their experiences in the game. They were the two main characters in the game instead of themselves. If they got familiar with the combat techniques of the characters, they might be able to pass some of the levels. After all, they were only playing at the lowest difficulty. The blonde young man named Ron mimicked the combat techniques in the game. It's so cool. It seems like these moves are easier to learn than the level 1 battle techniques. These techniques can help me kill one zombie with ease. The girl added in excitement. Those magical firearms are awesome. Joseph mimicked the moves. Most importantly, they felt like it was easy to memorize the moves that they learned in this strange mystical realm. They were on their way to their academy. Wow, look over there. Elves. They're elves from the Silver Moon Forest. Why are they here? Although elves would come to the Morning Light Empire occasionally, most people never saw them paying a visit that was as formal as this. There were few elves in human nations. The elves worshipped their own gods and had their own nations and cities. They seldom had dealings with human nations. But the Morning Light Empire was one of the rare exceptions. There were a little more than 10 elves. The elf in the middle wore a pure white cloak while the others wore the same style of light armor and carried exquisite silver long swords. These long swords were different from the big swords that human warriors in this nation used. They were even slimmer than the long sword of the Oriental shop owner. They had thought that the shop owner's sword was the thinnest sword there was. These elves' bodies were slender, and their ears were a bit sharper and narrower than those of humans, but not that extreme. The differences weren't so obvious. If these elves covered their ears with their hair, it would be hard to tell them apart from humans. Maybe the only difference lay in the facial features. The elves' facial features were much more defined and exquisite compared to most humans. They seemed to be favored ones of nature. The young people watched as the elves elegantly rode down the big avenue in the center of the city on some deer. Look who came to greet them. They heard a low chirp and saw griffins with golden feathers flying down the peak of the mountain in a neat wing-shaped formation. the Golden Griffin Knight Legion. It must feel great to fly in the sky riding on a griffin. I hope that one day I can join this Knight Legion. The young people looked up with envy. The Golden Griffin Knight Legion was one of the most famous Knight Legions in the Morning Light Empire. Joining such a Knight Legion was every young person's brightest dream. Stop watching. Let's hurry back to the academy. CIA reminded them, we're finished. If we're late, we'll be in big trouble. Joseph's expression changed. In this nation which put great value in fundamental combat techniques, how were their academies? They placed great importance in real combat since all battle skills must be used in battles. The beginners, including both fighters and mages, were treated the same under this rule. On the meadow near the academy, many fighters and mages, who weren't even level 1 or just reached level 1 or level 2, were practicing each day with big wooden swords, magic staffs, or other weapons. They practiced either in groups or one-on-one. But today, it seemed a little different. The students stood together in a neat group. It seemed like there was more than one class. Several classes were gathered here. Before them was a middle-aged swordsman with an unshaved face. Beside him was a valiant-looking woman in armor. A badge in the shape of a golden griffin was pinned on her chest plate, and her blonde hair was tightly pulled up in a bun on the back of her head. When the several young people hurried over, many of the students snickered. The woman frowned slightly. They are late. People dare to be late even on such an occasion. They probably don't know about today's special occasion. A luxuriously clothed young man said in a low voice. His thin and long face looked proud, and he seemed to be quite popular among the students. The moment he said that, some others chimed in. They are just bumpkins from the countryside anyways, a silver-haired handsome young man said. At this moment, the instructor coughed slightly and said, now that everyone is here, we'll begin today's combat practice. As usual, you can practice in groups or one-to-one. The instructor is not going to punish us for being late? Joseph and his companions were baffled since this instructor was usually very strict. However, they had other things to worry about. It seemed like other students had paired off already, which left the three of them alone. Hello, guys. At this moment, the luxuriously dressed young man with an arrogant expression walked over to them and said, if you have no one to practice with, do you want to practice with us? Joseph and his companions were startled since they had heard that these people came from unusual backgrounds even though they were not from the same class. Tolf, the luxuriously dressed young man, obviously had good talent, and it was said that his father was an aristocrat. They immediately found an open space. Thank you, Joseph said in a hurry. They had thought that no one would like to practice with people like them. Thank you? The silver-haired young man snickered and looked at them as if they were morons, and he said, idiots. The three young people froze slightly. What do you mean? It's natural that people like you don't know about this. The luxuriously dressed young man walked up and patted Joseph on the shoulder while saying in a low voice, we'll make good use of you foils to show off our strength. Foils? The three young people stared at them in bafflement. She is a knight from the Golden Griffin Knight Legion, and she is here to choose talented fighters to train as candidate knights in the Legion. Now, do you know why we chose you guys? He snickered and said, you guys are perfect foils for us to show off our abilities to her. The expressions of Joseph and his two companions changed slightly. What? We are late for such an occasion? Looking at the people before them, their faces turned ashen. Today, they would probably become foils to send others to their peak and help them reach their dreams. You're a few truly pathetic rats. Chapter 584, Nothing is true. Everything is permitted. Assassin's Elegy. While mentioning rats, we must first talk about the despicable and lowly rats who were hiding in the darkness. The people here called this continent Laura, which held the meaning of the land lit with bright light. They called a distant plain Thod, which meant immortal relic. That place was also called the continent of immortal relic. In the land lit with bright light, there was no place for darkness. However, this world still had existences hiding in the depths of darkness, assassins. The assassin group named Underground Council trained and kept the most notorious assassins on the continent. It was born after the destruction of the Sunrise Empire, which was heard to be a nation full of sunshine. But now, it was reduced to gloomy and damp ruins. Like the rats scurrying across the broken streets that were filled with potholes, the assassins who hid underground did the darkest business for money, including assassinating officials of other nations and knights of legions. Besides, they did all kinds of dirty jobs that ranged from fraud to stealing. Most people looked at them with disdain. It was said that the high-level officials in this group had been royal members of this empire. Of course, other nations also had fighters who worked as assassins, but they were not as despised as those in this assassin group. By calling the three young people pathetic rats, Tolf put them into the same category as the lowly and despicable assassins, on top of the already degrading superficial meaning. The moment he said that, more snickers sounded. It was infuriating to be compared with despicable rats. The woman from the Golden Griffin Knight Legion who was watching the combat frowned, since this word reminded her of something that had happened lately. Seeing the reddened faces of the young people who had been humiliated in public, she shook her head and thought, these young people are weaker to begin with, and their mindsets are disturbed by their opponent's words. I don't need to watch this battle anymore. Will you wastrels come together or one by one? The luxuriously dressed young man named Tolf said with a disdainful snicker. The three young people exchanged a look, and they saw the frustration in each other's eyes. Their opponents came from big aristocratic families with powerful backgrounds. It was obvious that they were no match for them. Tolf and his companions chose the weakest opponents. The instructor frowned slightly and shouted with some displeasure, "Begin. What are you waiting for? What did I teach you? Don't lose your courage for battle even when you're faced with powerful opponents. Don't lose your courage for battle even when you're faced with powerful opponents. Dodging its harsh attacks and finding its weaknesses before defeating it with any method you can is the wisdom of playing games." These two sentences seemed to overlap each other while the three young people remembered their life and death experiences with tyrants and lickers, and the omnipresent zombies. Ron slightly tightened his fists and said, "Let me do it." Tolf's face darkened, surprised that these wastrels dared to fight with them. "You are asking for it." With a sulky expression, Tolf slashed out with his huge wooden sword. Obviously, his combat techniques were good. He moved very fast, and his strength was explosive. Soon, he already arrived before Ron. The woman nodded slightly, since the speed and the explosive force that Tolf exhibited were quite good among the people of his level and age. As for the blonde young man, he clearly had less talent and strength compared to his opponent. Although he was brave, it wasn't enough for him to deal with his opponent. While she was thinking that, the blonde young man sidestepped with lightning speed, and the attack missed him. He dodged it. The blonde young man moved 3 times and dodged 3 sword strikes. Then, he placed his hand on his opponent's wrist, anti-joint seizing technique. The audience watched the unexpected scene with astonished expressions. They could see that the blonde young man's battle style was totally different from that of Tolf. He didn't use any combat technique, and his moves were not destructive at all. According to the common battle style, the blonde young man should turn back with a sword slash after dodging to send his opponent flying. However, the blonde young man simply pulled and twisted his opponent's arm with little effort. With his arm twisted up behind him, Tolf howled in pain and didn't dare to fight back anymore. What combat technique is this? Impossible. Tolf's mind turned blank. He couldn't understand how his opponent had subdued him, but he was certain of one thing. "I can't disgrace myself on this occasion." He quickly signaled the silver-haired young man with his eyes. Combat technique, wind strike. Ignoring the rules that they had agreed on, the silver-haired young man directly attacked with his sword. With the roars of gales, white air currents engulfed the blade of the big wooden sword. It was the condensation of gusts. This was a combat technique. Each combat technique, even the low-level ones, was powerful enough to inflict great damage. Quickly dodge, dodge. The silver-haired young man had a cold grin on his face. The advantage of the combat techniques was that they could only be blocked with other combat techniques. They were ultimate moves that could be used in offensive and defensive situations. How can he dodge it? The instructor's face darkened. Even though it was a wooden sword, it would break several ribs in the blonde young man's body. If he wasn't lucky, he probably would stay in bed for the rest of his life. While the instructor hesitated and was about to walk up to intervene, the woman beside him suddenly stopped him. Then, he saw that the young man had moved to the side right before the sword struck him. This young man dodged it like how he had dodged the tyrant's punch that had horrifying speed and force. Gales whistled past him. He dodged it, too. Together, 3 versus 3. In the next moment, Tulf and his 2 companions fell to the ground almost at the same time. The audience members gaped at the scene with wide open mouths. These people. Meanwhile, Mr. Fang had just exited from the game in his shop. Suddenly, he saw that the system had released a new task. New task. Nothing is true. Everything is permitted. Task content: the sale of Resident Evil 2 reaches 800, and assassins come to play in the shop. Task reward: the release of the Assassin's Creed series. Chapter 585. Sir, open the genetic lock. Mr. Fang looked baffled. Assassin's Creed. It frustrated him that he had to have assassin players in the shop in order to complete this task. Are you kidding me? Which self-respecting and busy assassin will come to the shop and play games? Mr. Fang wondered, are there such lazy assassins who can live long enough to come to play in my shop? Meanwhile, a woman walked toward the intersection outside the shop. She wore black leather armor, and the hem of her coat swayed in the wind, revealing her long and slender legs and long black boots. It seemed like no one noticed this figure on the busy street. But at a closer look, one would see that everyone seemed to unconsciously stay a few meters away from her. She reached up one hand to block the wind which blew at her flame-like long hair, revealing 5 white and tender fingers. Her exquisite face reminded others of the impeccable features of elves, and the silver earrings made her look vivacious. If not for the chilly light hidden in the depths of her eyes, many people would have thought that she was a female knight with a noble background. Subconsciously, she glanced at the weird name of the shop and thought, well, can this small shop really attract any customers? As an elite of the Golden Griffin Knight Legion, Helen was surprised. She had seen some special occasions when fighters dodged level 2 combat techniques with sidesteps, but it shouldn't happen with teenagers who hadn't even mastered a single combat technique. What's up? She immediately pulled the 3 young people into the nearby small forest. Where did you learn these combat techniques? From Helen's perspective, she felt like there was no way that these combat techniques weren't inherited from their families. The young people's faces turned red while they looked at each other. This was their biggest secret. Should they tell her their secret? If they did, others would also learn these powerful skills. What could they do then? Don't worry, the instructor said. Miss Helen will not force you to tell your secret. But if you want to join the Golden Griffin Knight Legion, you will have to tell the secret at that time. They hesitated and paused each time they began talking. Just as the instructor and Helen became frustrated with impatience, the young people said as one, we opened the genetic lock. Puchy. The Golden Griffin Knight Helen and the male instructor were astounded. What did you open? What is a genetic lock? I think we must have opened the genetic lock. When Fang Chi told Su Tanji the story, he didn't keep it a secret. So he didn't hide his chat history. The young people had been watching his screen with curiosity and thus saw the story. Remembering his previous fear and the eventual victory, the young man named Ron got excited and said with conviction, it's said that people can open their genetic lock under great pressure. We must have opened our genetic locks, which is why we defeated Tulf and his companions. Hearing his words, Helen and the male instructor felt like their brains had blanked out. After exchanging a look, they asked, what's a genetic lock? Explain it slowly. For example, an old lady can lift a car with one hand to pull her grandson from beneath the car wheels from an accident. It shows the great potential one can tap into when being placed in an extremely dangerous situation. the young people said with great conviction and logic. They explained that everyone had a unique strong suit which was the trigger to open the genetic lock. They gave some other examples. Hearing their theory, Helen and the male instructor exchanged another look, so deep and mysterious. So, Helen asked immediately, "Do you mean that you opened level 1 genetic lock under the tremendous pressure just now?" Her face twitched as she thought, "Are you serious? I face the Legion commander, my boss, every day, and the pressure is insane. Yet, I didn't open any so-called genetic lock. And you kids opened it in one brawl?" She stared at them with intense eyes. "Then, who told you about this genetic lock?" "Mr. Fang." The girl named CIA raised her hand and answered. At this moment, Mr. Fang sneezed in the shop for some reason. "Mr. Fang." Helen exchanged a look with the male instructor, and they got more baffled. "Who's Mr. Fang?" "The owner of the Origins Internet Club in the city center." Joseph said immediately. "He can fly while standing on a sword. Also, he can turn his shop into an ethereal realm with spiritual spells." Right. Mr. Fang is super powerful." The kids chattered. "Mr. Fang must be a master who has opened his level 3 genetic lock number. He probably has reached the legendary level 4. It was late, and there were few people in the shop. Fatigued with the gameplay, Mr. Fang dozed off at the counter, dreaming that the shop had activated the teleportation array, and he lured Xuanhuan over to play in the new shop. Then, he seemed to dream that he had opened level 4 genetic lock and mastered a new skill, instant synchronization. With this skill, he could get into complete synchronization for a second when attacking or defending, thus greatly reducing the consumption of synchronization time. Bang! A hand slammed on the counter, making the stone top shake a little. It instantly woke up Mr. Fang. "Who is it?" Mr. Fang looked up and saw a gorgeous girl who was wearing silver armor. She had taken off her helmet, revealing her golden hair that was coiled up in a bun behind her head. She demanded aggressively, "Open my genetic lock. Open your genetic lock." Rubbing his eyes groggily, Mr. Fang was still savoring his dream and getting a feeling for instant synchronization. 2 magic crystals per hour, and 10 magic crystals for activation. Helen's face twitched. "So expensive?" He even tried to trick kids with such exorbitant prices. "I'll give this unconscientious shop owner a good lesson." Aku. Rows of data flashed in Mr. Fang's groggily eyes. The synchronization time got consumed at great speed. FCK? Realizing that he hadn't mastered the so-called instant synchronization, Mr. Fang woke up completely while he turned off complete synchronization. He looked at the empty counter and scratched his head. "I seemed to have seen a customer." Then, he saw a figure clinging to the door. While waving the crystals in her hand, she said unclearly, "Woo, open my genetic lock." While taking the money from her hand, Mr. Fang pulled her off the door and asked, "Why did you glue yourself onto the door? Go and get online." "Damn it, you just wait and see." Chapter 586, Everything will be settled. As for the issue regarding if the genetic lock really existed and could be open. In fact, after Mr. Fang got strengthened by the T-virus, he found that his physical strength and reaction speed had greatly improved. Even though these benefits were similar to those of the genetic lock, one couldn't say that genetic locks existed and could be opened. One could only say that these benefits came from the T-virus itself. Mr. Fang didn't know if the genetic lock could be opened or not, but he knew that he hadn't figured it out yet. However, regarding the question if people could unleash their potential during danger, there were many examples showing that people could indeed unleash great potential during dangerous situations and under great pressure. While Helen began playing Resident Evil 2, Mr. Fang suddenly remembered his dream. Instant synchronization perhaps was going to be something that only he could use. If he mastered it, he might be able to possess the defensibility of Dante's Royal Guard style when he was defending and the awakening skills of the Soul Bender and Grandmaster when he was on the offense. He could save the precious synchronization time for the moments he wanted. Could a person's control of techniques and strength reach a granular level with ultimate precision? The answer was positive. If they kept working on their precision, they could achieve a realm that they wouldn't have imagined. The old players were talking in a group chat named Super Railgun. Xuanhuan said, I feel like I have opened my level 1 genetic lock. After playing Resident Evil 2, my reaction speed and control have improved greatly. Tang Yu said, I think I'm going to open my level 1 lock after clearing this stage. Jiangxi Oyu chimed in, I think I have also opened my level 1 genetic lock. A big white deer added, ha ha ha. I think I'm going to open my genetic lock very soon. They all thought that they had opened or were going to open the genetic lock, and they even defined standards for different levels of genetic lock. Nalan Hongwu said, I think I've reached level 3. Sutanji replied, Puh. Jiangxi Oyu added, while reading the messages, Mr. Fang had the urge to crawl over through the cable and beat these people. Meanwhile, Helen had died in the game more than a dozen times, getting killed by either lickers or regular zombies in many ways. She gaped at the screen while her character dodged the lickers' attacks, which were impossible to dodge for humans since it was beyond the reaction speed of humans. While controlling the strength in the body with great proficiency, she started to wonder, did I somehow open the genetic lock? How come I'm so powerful? Excited, she was eager to continue. When she was about to study the genetic lock some more, she heard a noise. Bang! The noise of a hand slamming the desk startled Helen so much that she almost fell from her computer chair. Then, an ordinary face leaned over with a harmless smile. The shop is closing. Okay. She ran out. Revenge. It was blatant revenge. Ah! A figure waved her arms crazily only when she got outside the shop. Regardless if the players could open the genetic lock or not, they had obtained tremendous improvement in their skills. In the later part of the game, the players could play as Chris and Ada and would thus encounter monsters much more difficult to deal with. This game would leave them with many nightmares and countless excellent plays and operations. Perhaps these cultivators and warriors would still remember some of the highlights in the game many years later. Meanwhile, on the other side of this world for the Flamebird family and the Thornflower family, they were presented with a good opportunity to rise above the other families. It was midnight, but the lights were bright in the conference room. Sitting at the head of the conference table, the fat man with a big belly had more than 10 badges pinned on his pure white army suit. As the speaker of the Flamebird family, his appearance didn't show his high standing. The sparse hair on his head made him look a little ridiculous, but his squinted eyes and the glints occasionally flashing in them showed that he was a cunning man. Sitting beside him was a middle-aged man wearing a formal black suit. His face was chiseled, and he looked like an elegant gentleman. His expression was always solemn and serious. A detailed map was spread out on the desk. Each detail in each area of the continent of immortal relics could be clearly seen on this map. It was so detailed that it even included the information of the influential figures in each area and each nation. Any new intelligence? The fat man asked. This is the most that we can get for now, Lord Alex. The white-haired old man sitting beside him answered, they have destroyed the portal. If we force our way in, they will discover us and intercept us. Alex, the fat, middle-aged man, frowned and said, the fact that these natives could capture the Vanguard General and the others shows that those people are becoming more incompetent. On the other hand, it means that these natives have their own means, and we must be cautious with them. It's said that they have treasures left by the ancient immortals. The middle-aged man with the chiseled face was the Thornflower family master. His brown curly hair and thin facial features made him look quite competent. He drew a circle around the area of Heavenly Abyss Sea on the map with his finger and said, we are on the offense, and they are on the defense. These damn natives will set a great trap here since this is the most vulnerable spot and thus their key defense spot. Damn it. I think we should give up on this place. Then, we'll be at the disadvantage, Lord Rain. But we have no choice. The elites of our Thornflower aren't a part of the suicide squad. They shouldn't be sent here to die. Rain said, we need nothing but a glorious victory. I can't imagine how they will look at us if other outcomes take place. Then, what's your plan, my lord? We will enter through this and this area. Rain pointed at the borders of the Ultimate West Realm and the Deserted Sea Realm. According to the intelligence that we gained, These two places are most vulnerable with the weakest strengths. We will catch them off guard by attacking these places. With minimal losses, we can establish a base in this damn barbaric world and then send more troops into this area to take. He pointed at the area around the Heavenly Abyss Sea. We'll take this place in one battle. When we descend onto this land, everything will be settled. Chapter 587, Supersuit Angie Cannon. Hey, did you hear that? Helen spent last night thinking about how to open her genetic lock and didn't sleep well. Coming to the headquarters of the Night Legion groggily, she heard people talking about things like war and the continent of immortal relics. It's said that those damn natives used despicable methods and captured the vanguard. General Carl, that genius named the Spear of Sunlight of the Lesson family, and Shadow Spirit Miss Jessica. Oh, I can't imagine the torture and pain that our beautiful and smart Miss Jessica must be enduring in that place. At this moment, Jessica was biting into a rind of melon while sitting on a couch in the Yuan Yang City shop. Aku. She was baffled. Who's talking about me? Aku. Carl had a cup of wine, oh no, a cup of iced red tea in his hand. He sneezed as well as he said, "Ah, I spilled it again. My pants. I did it again." Kevin said, "How come I'm fine?" He continued to eat the melon that he took from Jessica while drinking iced red tea. While the others were busy playing games, they could do nothing but eat melons on the couch. They were suffering from the torture of not being able to get online and play games. Oh. They also captured the Shield of Light, whose name is Kevin. He's a master who reached level 9. In the meeting room of Kanglan City, a knight wearing a set of armor with golden patterns said, "I hope that the armies of the Flamebird family and Thornflower family can rescue them." Aku. The moment that Kevin picked up a rind of melon, he sneezed as well, smashing his face into the fruit. He looked up and was at a loss for words. Of course, the Flamebird family is more ancient than the Listen family where Carl comes from. A middle-aged knight said with a smile. They are already creating momentum for this rescue mission. Oh, I'm so excited. Spiritual spell visual projection. I think we can watch this war when it begins. I'll ask the Legion commander for permission, so we can go and watch it together. A cheerful atmosphere permeated the entire Night Legion. Meanwhile, on the peak of the tallest winding mountain in the distance bright lights were still on in the grand hall of the palace which shot up into the sky like a sharp sword. "Princess, your highness." A white-robed old man bowed slightly and presented an invitation. "The Honorable Street Hines has sent troops to destroy those insolent barbaric natives." Interestingly, the Star of Flames of the Flamebird family and the Land of Thorns of the Thornflower family will appear in this war as well. Oh? The beautiful eyes of that female looked cold and indifferent. Also, the Inquisitor of the Darkwing Night Legion will deal with the person who caused the fall of the Vanguard General and Shadow Spirit. Street Hines plans to open the spiritual spell visual projection and is inviting your highness to watch it. Oh. The woman said mildly, "I might watch it to add some fun in my stable and boring days." Basaic. The white-robed old man quickly bowed. "Do you think that no one in the world can defeat me?" The white-robed old man said solemnly, "Of course, if someone says that the glory of Princess Your Highness can be destroyed, it will sound as ridiculous as anyone saying that these barbaric natives can defeat the legions sent by Mr. Street Hines. Helen was disdainful of her lazy colleagues who weren't focusing on the main task at hand. After crazily playing the game for a while in the internet cafe, she had a feeling that she was going to open her genetic lock soon. It must be. Otherwise, how come my strength and techniques have improved so much? After all, I had only played it for a very short time. In the game named Resident Evil 2, she had no strength in her, but she could dodge the tyrant's attacks and pursuit and even avoid Licker's super-fast attacks with great intuition toward danger. If Mr. Fang knew about her thoughts, he would think, WTF, I have been strengthened by the T-virus for so long, and I didn't even unlock the level 1 genetic lock, if there even is such a thing. However, you guys are saying that you are opening level 1, level 2, and level 3 genetic locks. attacks. Damn. Anyway, the cultivators of the deserted sea realm, spiritual state, and ultimate west realm had obtained great improvements in their abilities. In the game, Nalan Hongwu was controlling Leon, who had no firearm in his hands. Before him stood a huge monster wearing a researcher's coat that had been torn by the bulging muscles. This monster had one huge and distorted arm and a huge eye on his shoulder. It was William. Nalan Hongwu had only a dagger in his hand. William Birkin was the creator of the G-virus. He had super talents and a fanatic passion for the research of viruses. In the end, he had injected G-virus into his own body and turned into a monster. G-virus William was a monster more horrifying than tyrants. Only cultivators on and above the true lake realm had the ability to kill it. If one got too close to it, they could be instantly killed by its horrifying speed and force. Now in the game, the players had bodies of ordinary people and learned combat skills. At most, they had the top strength that could be achieved by a mortal. It meant that it was a battle between an ordinary person and a monster with the strength of the true lake realm. According to the plot, this horrifying monster would be killed by a ton of high-level weapons. But now, the players had only a dagger. This was the ultimate training. With the reflexes of an ordinary person, he would die instantly if he couldn't control the strength in his body with great precision. Nalan Hongwu controlled Leon to stand calmly before the monster. At this moment, G-virus William seemed to have moved slightly. Then, he shot forward like a cannonball with a roar. At the same time, Nalan Hongwu tightened his grip on the dagger. It may seem like he had no strength in his body, but in this state, he could feel each tiny strand of muscle in his body, and it felt like this body was in his complete control. Just before the huge fist smashed onto him with whistling sounds of a cannonball, Leon suddenly swayed faster under Nalan Hongwu's control, moving like a slippery fish. FCK, Z Shake, Song Kingfing and the others who had been watching from behind exclaimed. Then, with lightning speed, the dagger slashed out with strength coming from his feet, waist, arms, and all the other places in the body. Blood gushed out from the eye on the shoulder of G-virus William, the most vulnerable spot in its body. Superb. Awesome. After several attacks, William finally began to mutate. Its shoulders bulged while its face moved to its chest. It transformed into an even more horrid monster. Its fingers on the right hand turned into huge claws that were almost 1 meter long. Seeing the words, "Game over," on the screen, Nalan Hongwu put down the virtual reality headset with a shake of his head. Awesome. Awesome. He cleared the stage with a dagger. Meanwhile, Su Tanji was hovering in the sky above Liu Yunda's palace. From the dark clouds covering the sky, a thunderbolt crashed down. The flashing lightning energy condensed into snakes that seemed to be able to tear open the sky, and they gathered in the space before Su Tanji. Then, miraculously, the horrifying heavenly lightning energy in the circle drawn by her finger turned into a coiled lightning snake. Super. Subconsciously, Su Tanji looked down at her chest. Seeing that she hadn't become flat-chested due to the growth of her strength, she heaved a sigh of relief and yelled, "Super Su Tanji Cannon." Chapter 588, Techniques Reaching Dao Achievement, Limited Time Offer, Movie, The Duel. Helen looked absent-minded lately. In the past, she had gone into mystic realms to increase her strength, doing the same things repeatedly day after day and year after year to increase her strength. She did things such as killing high-level magic beasts and completing large-scale battles, etc. She had set targets for herself each day and finished them mechanically without thinking. However, it was different now. In this world named Resident Evil, she would wonder if there were more powerful magic firearms or even simpler and condensed combat techniques. She even wondered about the ending to this weird story about Leon and Claire. In this strange world completely different from the realm world, what kind of schemes are hidden behind the scenes? What is the ending to this story? Every day, driven by strong curiosity, she went into the world of this story to explore. It was something that she wished to do as early as possible each day. She had kept track of how much strength she had gained each day before. But now, she didn't care about it as much compared to other things. She shook her head. In fact, She didn't have time to think about the game right now. She was working and on duty. The Golden Griffin Legion strolled with a small team of elves on the street not far from the White Pigeon Square. The warm afternoon sunshine fell on the pebble-paved street while the balmy wind brought them the fragrance of soil and flowers, scattering the tense atmosphere before the war. For the elf clan that loved peace, they disliked the word war. When the elves heard the Knights of Golden Griffin talk about the recent news about the war, they frowned in displeasure. Elves excelled in poems, literature, and music, but it didn't mean that they were not good at combat. In fact, they had inherited a set of ancient combat techniques from their ancestors and had the most famous sword masters and archery masters in the world. Mr. Lance, the leader of this team of knights, was a middle-aged knight wearing golden armor. He was about 40 years old. Riding alongside him was a male elf with pale golden hair and exquisite and elegant facial features. He wore green tight-fitting leather armor engraved with beautiful and complicated patterns. As if sensing the mood of this male elf, the knight in the lead changed the subject. The knights of our nation value exquisite and advanced combat techniques. In this city, we have masters from all over the world. Mr. Lance, if you have time, you can visit the outstanding magic craftsmanship in our Kangland City. Really? I heard many people talk about Kangland City's magic craftsmanship and the Mystic Realm craft studios belonging to the Alchemist Union. Before Lance could speak, an elf girl who was about 16 years old said cheerfully behind them, "But our Sylvan Moon Forest's magic craftsmanship and combat techniques are also not bad." Of course, the Silver Moon Kingdom has the famous Moonlight Sword Saint, Master Pluto, and Master Sarah. The man in golden armor shook his head and said, "Mr. Lance is a sword master as well. There are so many masters in your kingdom." The girl stuck out her tongue and said, "I heard that the people who have the privilege to join the Golden Griffin Knight Legion are elites among elites." "Mr. Elven, you are a level 7 master already and an influential figure." Their horses ambled along the bustling street. Legion Commander Elven looked up. "Origins Internet Club? When did such a shop appear in our city?" "It only opened recently," a female knight said. "It's said to be a cultivation mystic realm. I heard someone mention it lately." "It's a good shop," the female knight added. "Ugh. We were just talking about these realms, and we ran into one," the middle-aged Legion commander said. "Mr. Lance, do you want to go in and have a look?" At this time, Mr. Fang had few customers. While he sat in boredom, 2 teams of knights stopped at his door and walked in. These people found the items in the shop quite weird, but they were less confused when they saw that the shop owner was a foreigner. "I think you, Miss Salah, is an unusual genius. Few people of your age can join Mr. Lance's team." They continued to chat. "Mr. Elven, your teacher is a famous master in this nation. We don't dare to compare ourselves to him. I remember that Mr. Lance is one of the youngest sword masters in the Silver Moon Kingdom. This should be a basic mystic realm of the lowest difficulty level." While talking about things like masters and sword saints, these people paid, got on computers, and started the game. In less than 10 seconds, game over! Exclamation mark. They suddenly stopped chatting. The place turned silent. Such lame players dare to say that they are masters and sword saints. Big Sword Crete swaggered past them with his peers and a bottle of Coke in his hand. He learned the slang from the shop owner and used it while glancing at the back of the heads in the tall computer chairs. Helen, who was about to start the game in excitement, heard this comment. "Puh." Elven stuck out his head from behind the computer chair while his face twitched. Lance stuck out his head from behind the computer chair as well. Damn it. Different from the old shops, the new shop was harmonious without any trouble after Mr. Fang showed off his ability to fly on a sword and sent Helen flying with one sneeze. However, the cultivators and warriors in the old shops in the deserted sea realm and spiritual state had a different feeling now. In the desolate remote place north to the 3 saint factions, the sky suddenly turned dark with thunder, lightning bolts, and gloomy clouds appearing. Meanwhile, in the sky above the small nation of mortals in the morning star sea realm where Fang Chi had visited once. Boom! Black lightning bolts as thick as water streams destroyed buildings. In the deserted snowy land in the westernmost area of the spiritual state, gloomy clouds gathered with the same horrifying phenomenon. At this moment, Mr. Fang received a prompt from the system. Beep. With most players in the shops reaching the threshold for combat techniques, you have obtained the achievement, Basic Techniques. Activating the series of achievements tasks, Techniques Reaching Dao. Techniques Reaching Dao, Basic Techniques. The number of players who have mastered the basic techniques reaches 10,000. Completed. Achievement Reward, Limited Time Offer, Movie, The Duel. Obtained. Info note: The Duel is a 2000 Hong Kong wuxia comedy film directed by Andrew Law and starring Andy Law, Ekin Cheng, Nick Chung, Christy Yang, Zhao Wei, and Patrick Tam. Techniques Reaching Dao, 2, Basic Techniques. The number of players who have mastered the basic techniques reaches 50,000. Incomplete. Achievement Reward, Limited Time Offer, Movie, Tai Kai Master. Info note: Tai Kai Master, also known as Tai Kai Master and Twin Warriors, is a 1993 Hong Kong martial arts film directed by Yuen Wu Ping, and produced by Jet Li, who also starred in the film. Chapter 589, Nothing is dazzling enough to be compared to it. In fact, in this world, at least many cultivators and warriors of the spiritual state and deserted sea realm didn't know what the ultimate realm for techniques was. Therefore, they usually focused on strength and chased after greater destructive power. When one's technique came to the peak stage, they could take a step forward and get in touch with Tao. This was the realm of techniques reaching Tao. Techniques were not auxiliary to strength. According to legends, there were 3,000 great Tao. Looking at the prompt on the system interface, Mr. Fang was puzzled. There's a time limit on this movie. Apart from the limit time, he also noticed other restrictions. 40 crystals, magic crystals, for activation, only available 3 times, and 1 viewing per person. FCK? Mr. Fang was astonished. Besides being expensive, it even set a limit on viewing period and time. It must be noted that as the shop owner, Mr. Fang now had high privileges and authorities. For example, he had the right to set the release date of the movie for different shops. Mr. Fang postponed the release date of the movie in the new shop. He had reasons for this decision. The customers in the new shop wouldn't understand the concepts shown in the movie. It wasn't that they were not good at techniques, but they couldn't understand the oriental techniques and the Tao shown in the movie since they were still hacking and slashing with swords and sabers that were as big as doors. Therefore, they still needed time to get used to this. Right now, the players in the new shop could do nothing but play Resident Evil 2 or watch its movie version. Laymen only go for the fun while professionals could spot the essence. Reaching Tao with techniques had nothing to do with the cultivation strength. Only people who understood it could see the dazzling power of that sword technique. The Duel? What's this thing? Lately, Su Tanji had come to the shop quite late due to her practice of the new spiritual spell. But today, she saw something new in the shop. Ha ha ha. She was excited. Since she had opened the genetic lock, which was a new concept, she had obtained great improvement in her control abilities and techniques, helping her break through the bottleneck in transforming lightning fire into threads. With her new abilities, she could finally practice that new spiritual spell. Today, she discovered a new thing. Limited time. We can only watch it once. So expensive? In the Yuan Yang City shop. Castell and Zhongwu had just arrived. The Duel, a movie? In Mr. Fang's tour group in QQ, Su Tanji had everyone. Do you guys want to watch the new movie? Get on board. Husky's grinning face. Jiangxi Oyu asked. Boss released a new movie? A big white deer said, I want to watch it. I'm on board. Nalan Mingsu typed, at Mr. Fang. Sir, are you coming? Mr. Fang replied, you guys can go ahead and watch it without me. Song Kingfing chimed in, it won't feel the same without the shop owner. Tang Yu said, come on, let's go. Yuninian added, sir, Get on board now, don't waste time. Mr. Fang said, don't fool around. This shop hasn't released it yet. Awesome. Nalan Hongwu said, great thinking. Song Qingfing posted a meme showing Mr. Fang clapping his hands fiercely. Mr. Fang almost spewed blood onto his screen. Ever since these people learned how to battle using memes, they created all kinds of new memes. Which one of you even learned how to use Photoshop? This software could be bought in Xzone. Song Qingfing replied, at Jiangxiaoyu. Mr. Fang's face twitched as he thought, damn it. As your boss, I only took a few bags of potato chips from you. Jiangxiaoyu said, then, we'll go and watch it without you. Hee hee. Husky's cute face. She tried to change the subject. Mr. Fang was feeling powerless. Meanwhile, the three people who could do nothing but watch others play gathered together. Jessica stared at the small blackboard and said, they have a new movie. Kevin suggested, now that the shop owner isn't here, should we? Carl replied, I tried it. When someone went to the bathroom. It's no use. At this moment, Gabriel said, can you guys help me throw the garbage? I'm busy watching the movie. The three people fell silent. Weren't they homies and good buddies? Feeling like crying, they went over to dump the garbage. At this moment, Sudanji, Nalan Hongwu, and the players in other shops including Zhongwu and Gachinian began to watch the new movie. Watching the movie together in Xzone, Nalan Hongwu and others found that the scene before them dimmed, and they couldn't see anything behind them as well. When they could see light again, the scene changed to a long street engulfed in a thin mist. It was a full moon night on the peak of the Forbidden City. The battle was scheduled on the 15th of August on the purple gold mountain of Muling, but Xuanhuan insisted and postponed it to 1 month later and changed the venue to this place. In a narrow street, a shop just opened. While steam floated out of the pot of soy milk, the audience saw two men talking about the duel scheduled in 1 month's time. One of them was a man who had 4 eyebrows. Luke Xiaofeng. This man had a mustache, and which counted a pair of eyebrows in others' eyes. TL note, Luke Xiaofeng is the fictional protagonist of the Wuxi novel series Luke Xiaofeng series by Gelong, and this movie was a section of the series. Xuanhuan? Nalan Hongwu murmured to himself curiously. Yi Guking? Zhongwu was also puzzled. Gradually, they understood that Xuanhuan and Yi Guking were the most powerful sword masters in this world. But how come I feel like the people in the movie don't have high strength? Zhongwu said in a low voice. I think so too. Sudanji frowned. Nalan Hongwu also looked disappointed. Let's watch it for a while and see. Soon, they saw the figure that seemed to have descended into the mortal world like a flying immortal. The white-clothed girl walked downstairs with a basket of yellow chrysanthemum, scattering the bright flower petals on the stairs and turning it into a flower carpet. Then, a person slowly walked up, stepping on the flowers. In the next moment, the viewers felt like they were fortunate enough to see that sword strike. They couldn't find words to describe the radiance and glory of that slash or its speed. It felt like it wasn't a sword slash but the fury of the god of thunder. There's such a person and such a sword technique? The audience stared at this streak of sword beam without blinking, afraid to miss any detail. With a bitter smile, Nalan Hongwu realized that he wasn't seeing strength but an ultimate sword technique that was at the peak of all techniques. It reached the ultimate level in terms of force, speed, angle, and timing. This man's opponent didn't even have a chance to block it. Despite the Tang family's world-famous skills with hidden weapons, his opponent didn't have a chance to use it. At this moment, the audience had the feeling that it was the most dazzling thing that they could ever see in the world, and nothing could be compared to it. This movie, FCK, so powerful. At this moment, most of them understood that what the movie intended to show wasn't strength but a new realm. How about Xuanhuan? Nalan Hongwu couldn't wait to watch what realm Xuanhuan, Yi Guking's opponent, had reached. Chapter 590, A Sword Came from West. Flying immortal beyond the heavens. There were many powerful techniques shown in Wind and Cloud. For example, Sword 23 created by the Sword Saint on Xuanhuan Field emphasized on the unyielding spirit that warriors should have when facing nature and their fates. This spirit overshadowed everything else. This movie didn't contain frightening strength, but it showed the swordsman's tireless pursuit for the ultimate sword Dao despite the limit of their physical strength. It was a road of reaching Dao through techniques. The perfect sword technique was the resemblance of sword Dao, without being overpowered by insane and brute strength. The sword Dao was clear and pure. As the movie went on, the audience followed the characters into the ancient and prosperous nation and the magnificent and luxurious Forbidden City, which was the royal city. After passing the gate, they saw the grand palace covered in golden glazed tiles. Under the moonlight, it looked like a world made of gold. Look, is the duel about to begin? Standing before the royal city, Dong Qinglai was excited as she stood in the crowd who were here to watch the duel. Senior sister, is this the royal city? Mu King looked around while grabbing Bei Ai's hand. Beside them, Jiangxi Oyu also glanced around curiously, standing with a big white deer. The bright moon shone on the boisterous crowds. Here he is. Here he is. Nalan Hongwu, Zongwu, and other warriors were also standing before the grand palace, and they looked up over the eaves of the building. Is he Ximen Chu Ixu? In the moonlight, they saw a figure flying over with his white clothes fluttered in the wind. Only after seeing him would people truly understand the feeling of the phrase, a type of people who are close to being gods. Just as he said, my sword is not for show. When you pierce your sword into their throats and see the blood flower bloom out around your sword tip, you'll know that nothing in the world is as beautiful as the radiance of that moment. His sword techniques were for killing. These types of sword techniques couldn't contain any impurities, including emotions and feelings. People crammed the space around the grand palace, including the audience from the shops in Yuanyang City, Jua City, and Half City. They all craned their necks to watch the duel. The moon was overhead now. Standing on the ridge of the roof that looked to be made from gold and glass, the two men were all dressed in spotless white clothes. They looked so powerful. Jiangxi Oyu watched with widened eyes. She glanced around and found that everyone around her was also watching with their eyes wide open. At this moment, standing on the roof of the grand palace, Ximen Chu Ixu raised his sword expressionlessly and said, this sword is one of the sharpest weapons in the world. The blade is 3 feet 7 inches long, and the total weight is 7.13 pounds. Yi Guqing said, good sword. Then, Yi Guqing lifted his sword as well and said, this blade is the best out of all the chili swords from overseas. It will cut through hair if you blow on it. The blade is 3 feet 3 inches long, and it's extremely sharp with a total weight of 6.4 pounds. Both had lifted their swords but didn't unsheath them. Drawing the sword was an integral part of sword techniques. Obviously, they wanted to compete in any area within the range of swordsmanship. So cool. Song Qingfeng wished that it was he who was standing on the roof, wondering how they could appear so dashing in a duel. Should we copy them after we finish watching the movie? Standing beside him, Lin Xiao suggested imitating this duel afterwards. Watching the mysterious incidents one after another, the audience began to understand the truth behind the postponing of the duel. The scheme of assassinating the emperor and trying to rebel helped the audience to better understand the characters who were both intelligent and complicated. Yi Guqing, the castellan of White Cloud City, seemed to be a lofty god. He was a proud and horrifying person. His sword technique, flying immortal beyond the heavens, was as impeccable and spotless as the white clouds in the blue sky. His mind was as unfathomable as the abyss and the ocean. The audience began to understand the unique magnificence of this world shown in the movie. If they had watched the duel right after Fang Chi's shops were opened, they wouldn't have been enthralled and wouldn't find these sword techniques exciting and grand. Before their swords connected, they moved their positions slowly but constantly, but the sword blades changed positions swiftly since the swords moved with their minds before using the techniques. Having a deep understanding of swordsmanship, only Nalan Hongwu could perceive the horrifying power of this realm. Regardless of how someone tried to dodge or duck, they would face an ultimate sword strike which was perfect in every way, including the spirit, essence, speed, force, position, and all other related elements. They showed a nearly perfect control of their swords. It seemed their sword moved with their minds, and people felt like there was no need for time to react. More horrifying was that no matter how their sword techniques, their positions, and their opponents' positions changed, Nalan Hongwu was sure that the sword techniques they used in the next moment would still be perfect. The audience had never imagined that such a combat method existed in the world. Now, the audience could only see the moving of the blades and the swordsman, but neither of them used their techniques yet. But Nalan Hongwu understood the duel. He could even see the countless duels in the slightest move of their blades. With their nearly perfect control, when they spotted the tiniest opportunity, they would instantly turn the changes and variations that existed in a void into a solid and perfect sword strike. Without the disguise of great strength and the show of force, others could see the underlying principles better. Finally, the viewers saw the two use their sword techniques. At this moment, the stars and the moon dimmed. All the light in the world gathered on the two swords. They each used only one sword strike. At this moment, exclamations erupted all over the shop. They saw that Yi Guking's sword was like a gust beyond the white clouds. However, an invisible thread seemed to be tied to Xuanhuan Xuexu's sword, and it represented his wife, his families, and his emotions. There was the tiniest gap between them. Nalan Hongwu, Zhongwu, and the cultivators including Gatinu all opened their mouths, trying to yell but couldn't, as if something strangled their throats. The whole place was silent. The moon and stars disappeared in the sunlight radiated from the morning sun from the east. However, the audience saw Yi Guking lie in a pool of blood, the man who had looked like an immortal and a white cloud in the blue sky. When all his schemes collapsed, he had decided to die under Xuanhuan Xuexu's sword, which was the last honor of a swordsman. Perhaps at this moment, two names were branded in the minds of the viewers. The names were as lofty as immortals and gods. This duel was printed into their minds as well. Like poetry, the saying goes, on the night of the full moon, on the peak of Forbidden City, a sword came from the west, flying immortal beyond the heavens. A long while later, they snapped back to reality. Ah, awesome. After watching the movie, Song Qingfeng almost roared. A sword came from the west, flying immortal beyond the heavens. Nalan Hongwu murmured these two sentences. Despite his great age and experience, his eyes turned red with deep feelings. Su Danji took out her black snow godly sword and lifted it while saying, "This sword is one of the sharpest weapons in the world. The blade is 3 feet 7 inches long, and the total weight is 7.13 pounds. She felt very cool while saying it. Palace Master Xdaolf saw this, and his face twitched. Damn it. It's black snow, not the sword in the movie. Then, Nalan Mingsu took out her snow-drinking saber and said coldly, "This blade is the best out of all the chili swords from overseas. It will cut through hair if you blow on it. The blade is 3 feet 3 inches long, and it's extremely sharp with a total weight of 6.4 pounds. She felt great about herself. The others had tears on their faces. Damn it. This is a blatant show-off.